I have the honor of speaking with a former both managing director and artistic director of Theatrical Outfit, Sharon Levy. So I would love to know, Sharon, could you describe your artistic journey prior to Theatrical Outfit, and also your awareness of the theater and its founders before you became part of the family?
Right. I'll answer the second part first. First of all, hello. This is great.
Hello.
Um, I actually was, so the Theatrical Outfit was founded in 1977. I arrived in Atlanta in 1977, late 77. I'm Australian by birth. I'd been living in London. I was married to a doctor who was hired by the CDC and out of London. And he was, so we were sort of packed up and came to Atlanta. I didn't really know anything about Atlanta. I'd wanted to come to the US. It was a great opportunity to do that. And it was Jimmy Carter years. There was a lot of attention on Atlanta at the time. And so I was quite gung-ho to be there. And why not? And so I started working at the Alliance Theater first because I actually met Bernard Havard and worked there making sound effects. Would you believe it? With the old tape and splicing and,
Oh,
really good at, getting just the right. And then I met, but I started casting around because that's, straight big theater was not necessarily my thing. And I started looking around and talking to everybody. And I met the Theatrical Outfit folks. It was a collective of artists of different disciplines.
mhm.
And so I hung out with them a little bit. And about a year later or so, I joined the company. So that's when I came in. And then I was with them in the performing arena in the Virginia Highlands area for like a year and a half before then this move happened to the Crest building. But my background, so, I was born in Australia, but my parents European, and my mother was born in Moscow, actually, and came from a family of artists, mostly theater, some music. They did not want me to go into
I'm
theater.
sure.
They thought for sure I was going to be starving in a garret somewhere and all would be lost. But, it was in my DNA and there was just no avoiding it. So I started studying in Adelaide, which is where I was born and grew up. There was a theater program that had started shortly before that at Flinders University, which was the second university, and it was very interesting and quite progressive. And so I studied there for 4 years and got a pretty good broad theater education. It was mostly European, but it was both the naturalistic, realistic schools and also the avant-garde and the absurdist and Grotowski and all of that. So,
Right.
and that was the time, that was 1970 through 1974. I didn't really know anything, I just had sort of knew that join the theater, join the circus, whatever. But I was really interested in it. And so I studied all of that and then left and moved to Sydney. And after I graduated and moved to Sydney, I realized I really don't know anything in terms of how will I how will I do this? How will I work? And I thought I just need to get tons of experience and get in there and do it. And so I stage managed in Sydney. Then I moved to London, which was sort of de rigueur for Aussies. You go travel for a year, backpacking, all of that stuff.
Right.
Um, and then I worked and I got a job with the British Theatre of the Deaf and toured with them through England, Scotland, and Wales as one of the stage managers. And it was phenomenal. And then came back to Australia briefly, and then Atlanta called. And so I arrived in Atlanta in September 1975, and I just thought, all right, I got the creative loafing, which still exists, right? And
No, unfortunately, it's only digital
oh
now. It's not.
no.
It's not a weekly anymore. It's digital. But yeah, that that
Okay,
that
all
was
right.
the, yeah.
Good. And I just thought, who's here? I mean, and all of that happened fairly quickly. And also, there was no internet. And so you couldn't really, to research what was going on at Atlanta Theater wasn't even a thing. So I thought I'll get there and I'll figure it out. And
Mhm.
so I looked to see and I noted all the theaters and I sort of called everybody. Bernard Havard's wife was an Aussie, or maybe she was a Brit. I can't remember. And we just kind of bonded, like I don't know where I am, in the South here in Atlanta. Didn't know anything or didn't really know the culture. Um, and so they offered me a job making sound effects at the Alliance Theater. So I was like, sure, why not? I
Right.
was 25 years old or so, and so I did that for about a year. But as I said, I then met the theatrical outfit folks. And I really liked the energy. I liked what they were about. It was a collective of artists of different disciplines. So there was actors, dancers, musicians,
Oh, wow.
um, and sharing the ethos was to sort of share their disciplines, but also nobody was making any. Actually, I think at the time, I know there were these CETA grants, CETA, and it was a city education something or other. And we did a lot of work in schools and
Mhm.
in prisons eventually, but so very much about working in the community. And I think, oh, I don't know, 8 of us shared 4 CETA grants or something, and we had other jobs, and we were all in our 20s, like late 20s, which is a time to really experiment and not. And Atlanta was very affordable then. I suspect it's not now.
It's changed. Things have changed.
Yeah. So yeah, so I started working with them loosely at first, and then more and more, and then some things started to change. You cannot hold on to any partnerships and groups of people. There's a limited shelf life for that. You get on each other's nerves. You start to have different ideas. That just happens, period. But so people started to peel off and go and do their own things. And so then it was down to 5 of us, then four, and then Marianne Fraulo, David Head, and myself. Um, were remaining. And we were sort of found by a local entrepreneurial PR guy, Paul Sanger, who came to us. And we were all about to turn 30. And I know for myself, I was like, okay, am I going to
Keep doing this.
serious now? Yeah, how am I going to do this? All of that. And so he came to us. He'd been on the board at the Alliance, had been looking for another company to sort of fill a space in the Atlanta theater scene. There was basically at the time the Alliance Theater and the Academy Theater.
Mhm.
I think a couple of the Black theater companies had started, Just Us, Jamandi.
Mhm.
I didn't really know them. And of course, Walter Dallas's company, Proposition, was in
Position.
the basement of the Alliance Theater, the Woodruff Arts Center. I'll tell you a little anecdote about that, which actually informs some of how I went forward. I may be rambling a bit here. You might have to.
Oh no, the rambling is beautiful. Keep going.
Okay, good. So I'm new to Atlanta. I was actually at the Alliance at the time, and I hadn't met Walter yet. I got to know him quite well later and very fond of him and very sad at his passing. But he was doing Genet's The Blacks. Now,
Mm.
I'd studied Genet. I did not know that piece really. And I thought, oh, I'm going to go see Genet's The Black. And I plunked myself in the front row. And if you know the piece,
Oh,
it's
I know the piece.
supposed to, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's supposed to be performed to a white audience and a sort of unknowing and pretty hard hitting. It's like, oh, you think you know? No, here, let me tell you. I didn't know that. I didn't do it on purpose. And okay, they came at me, and I thought afterwards it was like, fair enough. I put myself there. Nobody. And then I met Walter after that, and he thought it was hilarious that I'd put myself there. But it was a real introduction to Atlanta and
Mm.
the diversity of Atlanta. And it was not that long after civil rights, and so I mean, relatively speaking. So I got an earful, and I was like, okay, got some education here.
Right.
On we go. So that was quite an introduction there.
No, and that's a perfect transition to the next part too. So, if you could talk a little bit about, I mean, you have already talked about how Atlanta, what was happening in the city, but also how did that inform the work that you guys were creating and programming at the theater?
Yeah, yeah. You know, the late 70s into the 80s, we were transitioning from Jimmy Carter years into the Reagan era,
Yeah.
but it was still very freewheeling. I mean, I talk to a lot of people, especially women my age now, and we go, how lucky we were to come of
Mm,
age in the 70s when, okay, not everything was, perfect by any stretch, but as somebody young and coming of age as a woman, you was like, oh, we can do whatever we want to do. We can do. I thought that. I mean, I looked at what was possible, not what the restrictions were, but what was possible. And we all was like, wow. So it was to not do the broadest work, the most boundary pushing work, and we were in our 30s and early 30s, a sort of prime moment in time and the age that we were, and the theatrical outfit the ethos was very open to all, free for all, come on in, and let's see what we can do. A lot of the earlier work in the performing arena was original work, and we then moved a bit more to sort of scripted work, but there was a lot of amazing off Broadway play that was a time that was really fertile off Broadway in New York. And so there was a lot of interesting plays that we could license and do. And at the same time, for some reason, well, because Atlanta was on the move, both financially, culturally, Maynard Jackson was mayor, and in retrospect, I have to hand it to him. He understood that to make Atlanta a business hub, a thriving commercial hub, it had to have that could, exist and go on. It had to have a strong cultural life,
yeah.
and he made sure there were grants for artists. He did all kinds of programs. We did a cultural exchange with these artists that he brought in from Italy. One was at the time a well-known visual artist, Michelangelo Pistoletto. He was a sort of avant-garde artist, and a theater director from Milan called Leonello Gennaro. Their names, I know, Gennaro and Pistoletto, and
Right.
perfect. You couldn't make that
Perfect.
up. Yeah. Um, and we three of us, David, Marianne, and I, went to Italy in an exchange. They were in Atlanta for quite a while, and they worked with a number of companies. So he really got it.
Yeah.
And at the time, I just thought, oh, isn't that great? That's what should be happening. But in retrospect, I see it was very, very, very forward thinking. So, and then there was, Midtown Atlanta, where we had now moved. So Virginia Highlands was sort of one of the, and Little Five Points, the sort of hippie areas, and Midtown was just starting to grow, and corporations were moving in, but there were a lot of empty lots. And of course, the Alliance was at the north end, and there was the Fox Theater at the south end. And so there was empty spaces, but there were also clubs and music and bars. There was a really vibrant LGBTQ nightlife and culture there, and so it was sort of all of us
Yeah.
there, just that we were just there, and we wanted that, we were ready for that. It's how we'd been primed, and there it was. I mean, maybe it was just sort of a lucky moment in time, sometimes where a perfect storm happens. But and then a lot of actors in particular, but other artists, creative artists, designers, etc., musicians, gravitated to Atlanta because it was, the New South, and it was the home of civil rights, and it was and Jimmy Carter president. And so there were a lot of reasons why there was focus on Georgia, but Atlanta in particular. And suddenly now, with what we wanted to do, there was this cohort of actors, artists who had come to Atlanta. Some were from there, but from others from everywhere. Some had theater degrees and actor training, and some not at all, but just like, here I talk to people now, and it's like I'd forgotten. They just kind of showed up, and
Right.
I was like, what do you got? What do you, what can you do? And give it a go. And if they were good, you're hired. And if not, nobody wanted, they moved on. But so it was really, really open in a way. They were not, yes, we were, I mean, once we moved to the Crest building, we sort of, it was not a collective anymore. And David was the artistic director and I was the managing director. And so we had more specific roles, but there was still a sort of collaborative spirit. And I
Mhm.
was reminded by Bill Yates, actually, who performed and directed there and was our partner when we did Rocky Horror, which I'll get to later because that was a sort of real moment in time. And he said, David was really smart to decide that the first show of the season should be Royal Hunt of the Sun because there were a lot of male roles in it and we all helped build the theater out. I was sort of busy doing my own thing because it was like, okay, we're going to have to raise money here. We're going to need to, we were building out the theater. We had to set things up with the board to operate in a more, professional way, which we were really ready for. I certainly was. And so, people showed up. I think word got out that show up, come and audition. We held open auditions, I think, at the beginning of each season, and then sometimes for each play. But people could walk in basically and say, "This is who I am. Here's my resume, and I just want you to." And it was like, "Great, what have you done? And let's stay in touch." David and I, certainly David and I were very much of that. We were completely on the same page as far as that was concerned. And which was great because that doesn't always happen between artistic directors and managing director. Sometimes the art and the business, but
Yeah.
I think because we'd come from a different ethos, so
Mhm.
we were primed for that, and then we had this terrific group of actors, and a number of people who I've spoken to since reminded me that while it wasn't a resident company, it felt that way because
Right.
in lots of ways, because people performed over and over and over again, and they got to know one another, and so it just got better and better without having to be sort of stuck in that because then they could go work for other companies. But
Right.
so that was the general feel. And then there was music, Bernadine Mitchell was singing at the club
Oh,
down the street with
Bernadine.
the Mose Davis Trio.
Yeah.
I thought it's like, wow, and then Bern and I became really good friends eventually, and I've hired her for many things. So there was a lot of that. I don't think it was just us, though. Speaking of which, the Just Us Theater Company, I remind. So it was the ethos, the culture, but we were very much we were very gung ho about that. We wanted that, we loved it, and it was good for the work.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And you've already mentioned some of the other theaters that were in town at the time. So were there any theaters or community-based organizations that y'all were in collaboration with, especially once you moved into the Crest building?
Um, I was thinking about this, and I realized not so much with the theater companies themselves, although we did do a collaboration with Center for Puppetry Arts when we did Little Shop of Horrors.
Uh,
But and not because we were antagonistic, but we were all sort of youngish. We were doing our own
okay,
thing.
yeah.
We certainly shared the Atlanta Theater Coalition, started somewhere in there. I think I ran it at one point, not for 2 years, somewhere in there. So at some point we realized there are some things that we could achieve probably together, that separately, and you're all going after the same thing, same pots of money and support and all of that. So there were some things that we did do together. But for sure with artists, there was a collaboration with and quite a number, and I said not just actors, also some directors, definitely musicians, composers. I was remembering when I was putting together the production history. Wow, we used this, lighting designers, set designers, over and over and over again, and we all knew each other, and it wasn't that big a community. So that I'm not recalling any specific collaborations. We did. artists did come to us separately and want to, for example, Bill Yates and Pamela O'Connor came and wanted to do Rocky Horror with us. And so it was a co-production. We opened the space because we had this fantastic space. We opened it for late night productions. Eddie King reminded me that he did something, a midnight show, a Sam Shepard midnight show after the Sam Shepard on the main stage earlier that evening. So we were very open to collaborating with artists who brought us something that was like, sure, why not?
Yeah. And with so many artists and theater companies starting to pop up around that time period, what made Theatrical Outfit different, do you think?
I think the founding, setting it up because it was a collective of artists, it was very artist driven.
Mm,
Certainly all through that period, and even after, Eddie Lee took over from me, he was, and then Philip DuPoy and then Tom Key, and, so they continued it to some degree, but it was very that sense of different kind of artists, somebody maybe who was a set designer wanted to act, and it was like, well, come and audition and let's see. There was a lot of that kind of thing, and sometimes they were good and sometimes they were not. And writers came to us with work. I think while we programmed and we had pretty clear ideas of what we wanted to do, the boundaries were not fixed at all.
right,
And not to say that other theater companies didn't have that, but I think the ethos of the founders in particular, the sort of collective of artists working together, permeated for quite a while. And we, there was a clear mission, but there was a lot of room to. So
mm,
while we were doing a lot of very serious plays that were indicative of the time, then it was like, sure, let's do Rocky Horror, why not, and let's get RuPaul from down the street, he lived
right,
across the
right.
street, and let's, and Little Shop of Horrors, why not do that? And the Center for Puppetry Arts made these amazing puppets, which apparently somebody reminded me we ended up renting out to a whole lot of different theaters who did the production. Della's Diner came in. That had been a sort of commercial piece that maybe not commercial, but it was a fun musical, which some people might have drawn a hard line between serious plays and fun. No, and it was and Hamlet the musical. So there was a little bit of sense of irreverence, and if we could do whatever it was, do it really well, it had to have something to say about whatever we wanted to say or about the times or and there were opportunities to showcase artists that might not have fit into a different kind of mold. So and I'm remembering I loved that. It was
Yeah.
like hell yes.
Bring
I
it on,
love
more.
that. Yeah, bring it on. Absolutely. I still do. I'm still that way. It's like, oh yeah, we could,
Right.
let's use so and so. That could work, and it just anything that was expanded people's minds and thinking and ways of looking at the world, both subject matter and how you could go about operating. That was very much a sort of North Star for us, I would say.
Oh, great, great. So yeah, I would love for you to talk about two productions that you think sort of personified that ethos for y'all at that time.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and I have what I wrote was when I was looking at that question, I wrote that is a really tough one. That just to pick two, like your favorite children,
Yeah.
but the beginnings certainly Elizabeth the First and Crime on Goat Island, and I know that Stuart Culpepper actually named those in something he wrote. But when I think about it, nobody was doing that kind of work really in Atlanta, and it was serious, fun, funny, irreverent. It was perfect for the age that the actors were and the skill set that the actors that we had available. We could do it, and they did sort of push the boundaries of the kind of work I think that most audiences had seen, sort
Hmm.
of knew it was possible and that you could laugh and be serious. You could go through, all I always say for myself, the kind of work that I always want to do. I want it to, reach my head, my brain, my thinking. I want it to touch my heart and I want it to get to my soul, and if I can get 2 out of 3, that'll
Oh yeah,
sometimes settle
that's a
for
great
that.
rating.
I think that came out of the things that we were looking for. We didn't have a name for it. We didn't, but we wanted to. I think we wanted to push boundaries, but not slam it or not throw it out, throw
Mm,
all the bums out. It wasn't that. It was like, let's take a look at this. This is where we are. And also, Atlanta's in the South. I remember that I learned a saying when I was there that the only thing wrong with Atlanta is that it's in the South, which isn't to slam this, but it, Atlanta wants to go further and
right.
probably still does. I'm not as
Still
connected, of
does.
course. I have a feeling it's the same. But there's always there's a sort of conservative part of it that stops it from, and maybe in some ways that just allows people to go at their own pace. And you can't hit people in the face with this stuff. It doesn't work, doesn't change anything. Um, so it was we were finding material choices, ways of working that would just push people enough out of their comfort zone, but not so much that they were horrified. And well, once or twice they were horrified. We
Right.
we did do that, but you don't know where the boundary is until you go over it. So um,
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about the legendary Rocky Horror production?
yeah, yeah. Sure. So, as I said, Bill Yates and Pamela came to us and we thought absolutely great. And we had Gordon Patterson was living in Atlanta at the time, terrific music theater performer, and Megan McFarlane, the legendary Megan McFarlane. And so we knew we had some really good performers, and so we were looking at the casting, and I had worked with Rousseau maybe the year before. Somebody asked me, it was a charity, asked me if I would direct a fashion show for cystic fibrosis, I think, something like that. It was my hairdresser, and
Right.
his best friend was a fashion designer, and they wanted to do this, and they knew, we were sort of all friends too. And so they came to me and I said, yeah, sure, I'd be happy to do it. And they were really interested to do, it was going to be at Club Rio. I don't know if that still exists.
Oh, no, but I
And
remember. Yeah.
okay, to do something a little bit different. And I thought I used to watch RuPaul walk around the neighborhood. Sometimes he had a dyed mohawk,
Hmm.
sometimes he had a sort of wedding veil, absolutely beautiful. And I used to watch him and go, he is gorgeous and was so nice because we'd interact sometimes and I was quite amazed. And so I thought, I wonder if he would be interested in, I don't know how I would use him, but let's see. And I knew he danced at the bar next door. It was literally called the bar next door. Anyway, I stopped him on the street one day and asked him, and I think we met he used to live across the street at Peachtree and would have been 16th, something like that, above Brother Juniper's. And I went up there and he had this huge poster of Cher on one wall, a huge poster of Diana Ross on the other, and a big
Oh,
long
wow.
desk and he said, "Welcome to Command Central." And I thought, okay, this guy, he knows what he's doing. And so he did the fashion show and he was terrific. I sort of brought him out at the end with all the models and I can't even remember exactly. I wish we had video. Back then we didn't shoot everything, it was a whole big deal on a big camera, set up. So I'm sorry I don't have that. I have some photos, I think. But anyway, so I knew him. And then so we asked him to come play Riff Raff in he'd never done any, legit theater, stage before. And we weren't sure if that the arrangement if you've got to be at rehearsal this time to this time. We weren't sure at all, whether it would work. But it was great, absolutely great. And everybody loved him and he was just terrific. So between Gordon and Megan, who Atlanta knew from Della's Diner, RuPaul, they were introduced to, and then we had an interracial Brad and Janet, which for 1984 was pretty. So Crystal Fox played
Crystal
Janet,
Fox was amazing. Yeah.
right? And Christian Hessler, who sadly is not with us anymore, played Brad, and Jesse Clark was it, a Sonny Goff, Stuart Culpepper with legend. So it was a showcase, but also it just worked. It was so much fun. We had a great band, as Atlanta's always had good musicians.
Mhm.
And it ran and ran. And the one mistake as a producer that I really learned from was we kept, I think we extended it a couple of times, but we could have kept, there were lines down the block. And Melissa, when the first 6 weeks or so, but
Mhm.
we had a season that was supposed to start, and it felt like we'd extended as long we have to start the season. Nowadays, I would just say that season can
Keep
happen.
running.
Keep running because, what am I going to sit in front of another sea and beg for money, and we have a source of in the best way possible, but you live and learn.
Yeah, that production is, I mean, literally, I came to Atlanta in '89 to attend
Oh,
college.
okay.
And so, but that production, people were still talking about it in '89 when I got here. So
Yep.
that's amazing.
We had somebody on roller skates. We had it was so much fun, and the audience and the cast were having as much fun. It was just really well done. It was a perfect combination of things, so it's great.
That's
Yeah.
great. So I would love to know how did your time at TL, how has that continued to, I guess, feed and influence your work now?
Yeah. Um, One thing is for sure, spending 12 years in theater in Atlanta really, I am so glad I didn't come directly to New York. I think I might have been eaten alive. I was ready. In fact, Bonnie Pike, who also no longer with us, but was a resident playwright for a number of years, she said to me when I was leaving, she said, "You got your PhD here." And
Mm,
so working with a huge variety of artists in a very, open but structured way. Those two things are not necessarily at odds with one another. Um, I felt ready to step in to New York. I didn't want to go to work for somebody else's theater company.
right.
I wanted to develop new work. I wanted to be independent. I'm glad I didn't understand how completely insane and ridiculous and difficult that is at the time, because why not? No, and Atlanta was, because of the ethos of, well, we don't know exactly how we're going to do this, but let's do it. And the way is open. I guess I brought that into New York, and it's just as well, because I didn't limit myself, didn't make it easy, but it was what was to be done.
Mm,
I think also I was thinking about this earlier, that music, Atlanta is working closely with a lot of musicians in Atlanta.
mm,
And I think I sort of decided that I probably wasn't going to be doing straight plays very much in the future. Not against, by any stretch. I have done one or two, but that I wanted music to be part of everything. So working closely with Bernadine, you know, Mose, all those guys, there was just some terrific musicians. Then I, worked with Philip DePoy and Michael Keck, who'd come from Mother's Finest, though he hates me saying that.
I love Mother's Finest.
I know. Uh, and because he's an actor and he, and a composer. And so I'd come from Australia. I wasn't, well, I'd grown up with, Aretha and Stevie Wonder and all of that. I wasn't exposed to it personally. And the minute I stepped into Atlanta and it was there, it was like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
And so that allowed me then to come into New York knowing that that's musically, that's where and then I worked with John Faddis. I worked in the jazz world,
Mm.
uh, and Dizzy Gillespie for some years. And so I don't think I could have walked into that without having worked with those people in Atlanta and come to understand a bit more about the music. When I was working with John Faddis here, we were driving somewhere to some gig, and he had the jazz station on, and he was making me. I'd worked with him for about a year, and so he'd been giving me sort of an education. And he said, "Who's playing drums on that?" And I was, oh
Oh,
my God, yeah, yeah, yeah. I got a few of them, but I understood how important too that it was to know about. It's one thing to want to have a free, open, let's do this, let's use that, but it's not right to just walk in and think wouldn't this be cool, let's put
right.
on a show kind of deal, that to understand. Definitely the jazz musicians taught me that. It's like you do not come in and presume. You're welcome, but do not come in and presume without you gotta go through um the gauntlet a little bit. You got to know something about what's going on. I mean, with John, Milt Hinton was toured with us with something, and oh my God, sit there over lunch with him, and he'd tell the stories. It's like, and so it was a real preparation. It was a perfect jumping off point, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, no one understands craft like musicians, and especially jazz musicians.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, you have continued to create work. You have your own company, and so you're very well aware of the current challenges that we have in terms of funding, in terms of, all the challenges that come with, trying to make art in America at this particular time. Um, if if you were thinking about the next 50 years of theatrical outfit, what would you want to see, or what would you challenge us to explore?
Yeah. Um, the first thing I will say is that because I haven't been part of the Atlanta community for a long time, I would not presume to come with anything definitive. But that said, Atlanta always had so much promise
Hmm.
and and has achieved some of that. There was always, in terms of being progressive and pushing boundaries, I would just say I would hope that the community of theater artists would keep trying to push the boundaries. I know that's really hard everywhere, for all of us in this climate, but there's also a lot of private money out there, and there are people
Hmm.
who want to work against that current, and we cannot be felled by, oh my God, the zeitgeist is, and there's been some writings lately, and I won't name names about,
I know what you're talking
I know
about.
you do. Yeah. It's dead. And so when you get to be this age, it's like, oh my God, how many
How many
times have
times are
we
we going to
heard
hear
that?
the theater's dead
And why?
again?
It's like the world is coming to an end. The world is nigh. That guy, theater is, the end is nigh. So if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. But we cannot live our lives
Hmm.
thinking it's dead. Is it difficult? Is the nonprofit model that really began in the early 60s, let's say, it's not dead. Does it need shifting and changing? Oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
There for sure during COVID and the George Floyd moment, and when everybody was suddenly, it was a real moment to understand what had been happening, and I had a lot of people reaching out. It's like, do you know any black designers? Oh my God, we have to start hiring some. And I thought I hadn't realized the degree to which, like in the Northeast, for example, Ivy League, that was so cloistered. And
Yeah.
Atlanta has not been that. And so Atlanta has ways to lead the way. We were doing, DEI at 40 years. We didn't call it that. We didn't know. It was
Right.
just come on, we're all, you any good? Let's go. And or can we help make you good, or can you help make us different and good? And so that was the feeling. So I feel that Atlanta is in a place that it can, in some ways, really lead the way in that regard. And just to, you keep on keeping on, keep doing it. Does it mean, and there's always ways. We all know in our personal lives, there are sometimes you're a little more flush than others, and you figure out how to do it. You can't, if you want to give up, look, sometimes you have to give up. You have to cry uncle and you're done. And that's a hard call, and that's a hard thing to know. But dead, no. Difficult, yes. Not the first time there's been difficult. Do you have to do 4 shows in the season rather than 6? Maybe. But
Right.
don't make that. Do you have to make one of those compromises? Yes, shifts and balances, but don't like bend the knee completely. Do not capitulate, because we're seeing that happening. And we're also seeing, if you have to stand up to whatever degree that is not going to kill you, and or hurt you irrevocably. Those are hard choices to make, really hard. And it's almost impossible to know where is the balance of that. And you just have to check it, try something. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. And if that doesn't work, plan B, or or you went to plan B first of all. It's like, well, we might as well go to plan A, because, so we just, we have to stay flexible and open. And these pronouncements that this is this and this is that and that, I just can't.
Yeah. No one can kill storytellers. I mean, that's not going anywhere.
No one can kill creativity.
Yeah, at
They'll
all.
try. I
Right.
mean, they've always tried.
They've always tried.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because they hate that, because then they can't, keep you believing that something is this and fits in this box. It's our job as artists. It's maybe our one and only job, really, bottom line, is to keep pushing those boundaries and tell stories. And we can't make people do anything or see anything or understand anything, but we can shine a light. We can lead the way. And it's and it's dangerous, your little flashlight in the dark sometimes. But I mean, I always felt like, okay, is the choice between doing that and maybe like, oh my God, or taking a safe route and hating myself for it. An
Right.
overly safe route. I don't mean we all, there are always choices that you have to stay alive and you have to keep and all of that. But so tough, but and as I said, funding, yeah, NEA, all of those sources, but there are foundation, and there is private money.
Yeah.
There are some people with a lot of money, and now it's getting them to part with it and to believe in what. But that's the other thing. You have to really believe in what you're doing. I was thinking about, back to an earlier question about what was the ethos of the times. Well, we we really believed in what we were doing,
Yeah.
like really believed, and we worked our butts off. We worked really hard, but we had a good time doing it because we were committed to it, and we were doing it with one another. And everybody was working hard. It's not just, I'm the only one here doing it. No, not at all. And I mean, I will say that I'm a bit of a, 2-speed person, like all in. I know some people have reminded me that see me like zooming through the theater. Sharon, I need to share. But when you do that, you bring people along with you. And I learned a lot of that from David Head and I have to say, with this 50th anniversary coming up, I am sorry he's not alive
Yeah.
even though, yes, he and I went different ways. We did talk since, and we talked about 10 years ago at length, which was great. And I wish he were here too, because his energy was massive then.
Yeah.
Massive. It was almost, I'm sure
Yeah.
there were some people who liked too much, um, but we have to have that to do and in theater too, because it's a dynamic, collaborative, art form, and you sort of have to keep going, and there's an opening night, and there's going to be an audience, and you've got to get to that point. It's hard. It's a lot.
Yeah, yeah. Sharon, thank you so much for taking the time and really sharing your wisdom and insight. And I just want to say personally, I mean, if it wasn't for the amazing work that you and David did as institutional leaders, I wouldn't be at TO.
Well,
So
thank you, and let's thank the founders too, because they
yeah, and the founders
assisted,
too
and
as
then we
well.
yes, but I feel really proud of the fact that Theatrical Outfit still exists, and not just exists, but is thriving as
Yeah.
much as theaters thrive. It's like, oh God, it was all worth it. Absolutely. Not that I thought that it wasn't in any way, but it makes me happy to see, it's like, yay, go for it, go on, take it on, because we'll be gone.